Welcome to this lecture for History 314. Today we're going to be talking about some challenges to Soviet power in Eastern Europe. Once the Cold War begins, it's easy to get the impression that Soviet domination of the eastern half of the continent was total and complete. But really there were several challenges during this period, and we're going to explore some of those. By 1947, Europe was divided into two hostile camps. The line is typically called the Iron Curtain, and it divided the capitalist, democratic Western Europe from communist, totalitarian East. The nation most affected by the Iron Curtain was Germany, which was divided right down the middle. This division had been created in the peace following World War II, when the Allies had agreed to administer the reconstruction of Germany jointly. Germany was divided into four zones: the French, the British, the American, and the Soviet zone. As for the rest of Europe, the continent was divided into two hostile camps. There were the Soviets and their allies in Eastern Europe. This alliance of communist nations was solidified by the creation of the Warsaw Pact military alliance in 1955. On the other side was the United States and its allies in Western Europe. This alliance was formalized with the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, in 1949. This marked quite a change for Europe's former great powers. Europeans who had once ruled the world were now largely pawns in the rivalry between the world's two great superpowers. What does Soviet domination mean? Well, it means that all political parties, with the exception of the Communist Party, were outlawed in Eastern European nations. Even left-wing parties like the Socialists and the Labour Party were eliminated. In other cases, political opponents were simply purged. There were massive arrests. In fact, 200,000 people were arrested in Hungary alone. Many received long prison terms. Some were sentenced to labor camps, and thousands were executed. Through these purges, Stalin replicated the totalitarian regime he first established in the Soviet Union. But then, in 1953, Stalin died. He was replaced by Nikita Khrushchev, the son of peasants. He rose through the party leadership and won a brief power struggle with other Soviet leaders when Stalin died. No one knew what Stalin's death was going to mean for the Soviet Union or for Eastern Europe. Would Khrushchev continue to develop his predecessor's policy of totalitarianism, or would he relax Soviet rule? This uncertainty led some to test the new Soviet leader. The first challenge to Soviet authority came in East Germany, where labor strikes erupted in 1953. The strikes quickly turned violent, and Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin to put down the protest. This violence led 330,000 East German citizens to flee to the west, most through the divided city of West Berlin. A second challenge to Soviet authority came in Hungary in 1956, when liberal Hungarian communists sought to free Hungary from Soviet domination. They claimed that they didn't want to end communism in Hungary. They just wanted more independence and a more liberal or democratic form of government. The leader of the uprising was Imre Nagy, a communist leader who advocated greater freedom for his country. He wanted to open the political process in Hungary to other political parties other than simply the Communist Party. The Soviets tolerated his reforms until he demanded that Soviet troops leave Hungary. A few days later, Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest and crushed the resistance. A purge of the Hungarian Communist Party ensued. Hundreds were convicted of treason and executed. The most dangerous challenge to Soviet power in Eastern Europe was in Berlin, however. Berlin was in the middle of Soviet-dominated East Germany, yet the city was divided into the Communist East and the capitalist West. In this way, West Berlin remained an oasis of democracy and free market capitalism. It also represented a way for people seeking to flee communist Eastern Europe could travel to the West. It was sort of like a portal to another world. If you could get to West Berlin, you could get to the West. In this way, Berlin became sort of a Cold War flashpoint. As I said, it was a portal to the West, and between 1949 to 1961, 2.8 to 3 million East Germans will escape to the West through West Berlin. Now that's 16% of the population. This quickly is going to prove to become a crisis for East Germany. Why? Well, it's embarrassing for one thing. The story the Soviet Union was trying to tell was that communism created a paradise for its people. Yet, if it was such a paradise, why were so many people trying to escape it? It was also a problem because of who was trying to escape. Educated professionals were most likely to attempt to make the crossing from east to west. In other words, the people that East Germany needed most were those who were fleeing the country. But President John Kennedy, when he was elected in 1960, reasserted America's commitment to West Berlin. Tensions, therefore, continued to grow over the divided city. Finally, Khrushchev decided to act. On August 19, 1961, he began construction on the Berlin Wall. The intention was to halt easy travel between East and West. This easy portal to the West would now be closed. Those attempting to cross it would be shot. So in conclusion, from 1945 to 1961, there were multiple challenges to the Soviet domination. In other words, multiple challenges to Soviet totalitarianism. These challenges arose in East Germany, in Hungary, and in East Berlin. Now, it's true that each one of these challenges failed. Nevertheless, these challenges show that Soviet totalitarianism was not complete. There were those who desired change. There were those who wanted a more liberal way of life.